November 4th, 2002. We are interviewing Mr. Forrest Rinehart at the United States Air Force Museum in Dayton, Ohio. I will begin. I'll make it as painless as I possibly can for you.
Good.
I want to thank you for coming today. Appreciate you being here so that you can be part of this and we can get your story for the Library of Congress. I just kind of want to start out, if you would tell me what branch of the service that you were in, what war that you served in, and your rank at the time.
Okay, at the time it was the U.S. Army Air Force. Later became the U.S. Air Force. How do you want me to do that? Yeah. World War II. Where do we start? Way back at the beginning?
Yes, at the beginning. Well, let's put it this way. How old were you when you went into service?
22.
Okay. Now, did you enlist?
I was drafted.
You drafted, okay.
They promised me I wouldn't be drafted. I was at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base training for a civil service position. I asked for a deferment, 6 months. It was refused. They said, no problem, said you won't be called. Guess what?
Surprise.
On my birthday, 19th January, 1922, or 42, I got a letter that said, greetings. So that started as a draftee.
Now, as a draftee, were you able to choose the branch of service you went into, or did they choose it for you?
Fortunately, I went to Fort Hays, and also fortunately, I had built model airplanes, younger, and they, as I was going through processing into the Army, told the sergeant at the desk, I'd like to be in the Army Air Corps. And I still remember him reaching down in a desk drawer, pulling out a little pamphlet, opening it up, and said, what is an empennage? I told him what an empennage.
What, can you tell me what that is?
That's a tail section of an airplane. What's an aileron? That's what you control on your wings, your right and left. And he's closed it up, put it away. After three times of kitchen duty and 9 days, orders came up on the bulletin board. 2 of us went to the Army Air Force.
Oh my.
So that started the Army Air Force career.
Okay, so this was 1942.
42 birthday.
Were you married at the time, single?
No, single.
Single?
Yeah.
Okay, and where did they first send you to take your Air Corps training?
Well, Jeffersonburg, Missouri, in February. Terrible time to be in. It was muddy, and again I was fortunate. I got into a nice 2-story barracks. The rest of the people on the base lived in, it looked like a mud hole to me, in tents. So as we go along, I'll tell you how lucky I've been this whole
Did you carry
career.
anything for a good luck charm, or was this just your guardian angel working
Just
overtime?
my guardian angel, I guess.
Okay.
He sure took care of me.
Okay. Where did you, now were you in Missouri all the time until you disembarked?
No.
Or?
I was there for about 30 days, basic training,
Okay.
learning to march, and things like that. Then one day orders came out to go to Brookley Field, Mobile, Alabama. I had no reason or what to think. Where was I going? Why? So we stayed in Brookley for, well, one day, here I am, just a private, no stripes, no nothing. I was on duty up in headquarters. I think I just sweeping the floor or something like that. And one of the sergeants says, how would you like to go to aircraft mechanic school? I said, fine, that would. So a few days later, orders came out to go to New York City. It was Long Island City, really. At 29th and Broadway, we lived in a hotel. So again, I lucked out. I got to go to, on Long Island City was the school, and we lived in New York City.
Was it a far commute between the two, or?
We marched right down Broadway to
You marched
29th.
as a unit?
Yeah,
The unit
yeah.
marched out?
It was a
Okay.
small outfit,
Okay.
not very big. And we got on each Friday, they gave us 10 nickels. It cost a nickel to ride the subway. But each Friday, we received 10 nickels. Actually, 10 nickels. The turnstile took a nickel to go through. So we marched down Broadway from 29th to 34th, took the subway to Long Island City, and again marched down to school. That time of year, that's 1942, so there wasn't much traffic in New York. Well, it's almost completed with the school, and 3 or 4 of the fellows said, let's go down and take the aviation cadet exam. I said, okay, I'll go with you. So we went down to, I forget where it was, and took the cadet exam.
Now this would qualify you to be a pilot?
To go to training school.
Okay, to go to training school to be a pilot.
Took the aviation cadet program.
Okay.
Let's see, I remember there was a captain giving the exam. It took about 3 hours. It was supposed to be equivalent to 2 years of college. We all went out to take a smoke, which everybody did then. Came back in, and this captain says, when I call your name, go to the room next door. So he called out the names, and he got all through, and my name wasn't called. So I said, well, that's the end of that. And he says, congratulations, you all passed the exam. I like that again. And
now, did your buddies pass the exam too?
no, that's
They didn't?
One of them even told me one of the words that would be on the exam. I forgot what the word was now. It was a big, long word. He missed it, and I made it. So
Oh my.
it's just, the whole career was like that.
Was it?
Then that started, it was like 2 days before graduation, and they later sent me a diploma and said that you completed the school. Then I went to Nashville, Tennessee. They had a classification center, and that's where they determine where you're going to be, a pilot, a navigator, or a bombardier. So I took the test, and I ended up being qualified to train to be a pilot. Then we went to Montgomery, Alabama, which was pre-flight, they call it. No flying, just ground school. All kinds of.
And what did they teach you in ground school?
Wet weather, principles of flying.
IFR training?
Not yet. And then more marching and parades, and that's about it in the primary.
And how long did that last?
Again, I got in trouble in that section that time. About halfway through that, I contacted or got yellow fever, or yellow jaundice. So that meant 6 weeks in the hospital. I was assigned to class 43D. So this was 2 months, about six weeks through, I got yellow jaundice. They sent me to the hospital. I got out of that. It was too late to go to the next class, so they sent me home for what they call recuperation leave. And I came back and started in 43, or F instead of D. I skipped one and went to 43 F.
Okay.
Then from there we went to pre-flight. Pre-flight, went to primary training. That's where we started to fly. And the only bad part about it was the time of year was December. By the time we got to Tennessee, opened the old PT-17 airplane that had the biplane, had 2 lanes, open cockpit.
That's what they used as a trainer?
Had a trainer. They had those, and they also had a single, or a different type of airplane. I got the Stearman. And you know how cold it gets in December. All I can remember about primary is how cold it was. They hadn't invented the chill factor yet.
You guys did, right?
So about 20, it'd be about, you had to have 20 degrees of temperature to fly. Well, 20 degrees with a 90-mile-an-hour wind, that put the chill factor way down there. We wore sheep-lined clothing, sheep-lined boots, pants, the old sheep-lined jacket. That was about around 6 weeks of training. Then we went to basic.
Now this was in 42 or 43?
42 still.
Okay, so
late,
42.
Late 42.
Okay.
And then we went to basic in the old BT-13 called multi-vibrator. That was in Arkansas. That was about 6 weeks. Then we moved up to Blytheville, Arkansas, which was twin engine training. I went into twin engine and flew the AT-10.
Now what's the AT-10? Is that a fighter or bomber?
That's a twin engine,
Okay.
twin engine type airplane.
Okay.
Small engines, just room for 2 people. That lasted till June the 30th of 43. That was graduation.
Okay.
It was all over.
Now what happened after graduation?
Okay, we were brand new second lieutenant. So I, either lucky or unlucky, went to B-24 training
Okay.
at Smyrna Air Force Base, Nashville, Tennessee. It's about 20 miles from Nashville.
Okay.
So that took, that was a couple of months of training. Then other assignments, Salt Lake City, Utah, we started to form squadrons and groups, or crews really, in Salt Lake City. Then we were only there about 2 weeks, if I remember right. Then we go to a place called Harvard, Nebraska. Little town, and Harvard was so little it didn't even have any housing, so we lived in Hastings, which is about 20 miles away. That was the beginning of combat training. It was called second and third phase, operational training. I was a second lieutenant, a captain from the RCAF came into the outfit. So, captain, lieutenant, I was assigned as co-pilot.
Okay.
So I had to fly co-pilot for him.
Now that's the Royal Canadian Air Force?
Yeah.
Okay.
With RCAF. He had been in their branch, so he was given the captain's rating in the Air Force. We had 2-3 months of training at Nebraska. Practice bombing, night flying, practice formation.
Now did you use real bombs?
Just dummy. They're
Just
called
dummy
dummy
bomb,
bombs.
okay.
They were filled with, a lot of them were filled with like a powder.
Okay.
So when they hit, you could see the white.
See where it hit, okay.
So it was a lot of training both for the navigator, well, the whole crew, navigator, the
Now were
bombardier.
you training in the B-24?
Yes,
Okay. And how many crew was there in the B-24?
10. And we had 10 people. So it was good training for the navigator and the bombardier, and at the same time the pilot, because he had to learn to fly formation. That lasted until late March of 44. We're up to 44 now. I don't remember the dates in March, but we got ordered, the whole group. This is not the group I flew with overseas.
No, it's not.
We'll get to that later.
Okay.
That was the 484th Bomb Group. I trained with them, flew with them, went overseas with them. It was April of 44 when we got overseas. From Lincoln, Nebraska is where we received 45s and special chute backpacks that had survival equipment in it.
Now what did your survival pack consist of?
Oh, okay, food, a little
Like K-ration?
K-rations back
Okay.
then. I remember it had a big machete in it. But we were flying the southern route over South America and down through there. So they gave us like a machete if you have to hack your way out of it.
So you were flying down there in combat, or were you flying down there as training?
To get overseas.
Okay.
There was 2 ways to go overseas. You could go the northern route, but it was winter coming, or it's still winter time. So it's too cold and icy. So they said you go the southern route.
Okay.
Down through Puerto Rico, Trinidad, South America,
Okay.
Dakar in North Africa,
Mhm.
and up to Tunis, right outside Tunis,
Okay.
a place called Jakarta.
Mhm.
Well, they gave us orders out of Lincoln when we took off, said, don't open these until you're 2 hours out. Well, we didn't take off from Lincoln, we went to old Morrison Field in West Palm Beach, Florida.
Florida.
It was called Morrison Field.
Mhm.
But we took off from there with that envelope that said, do not open until you're 2 hours out.
Now, when you took off, you flew your planes over to your
Yeah.
combat assignment?
Yeah, we did,
Okay.
the whole group.
Did
as
you?
a
Okay.
group.
And I'd kind of back up a little bit. Besides the machete, what else did you have in your
Oh,
survival kit?
All I remember is just
K-ration and a machete?
K-ration, machete, and probably some water, I would think.
Okay.
But I cannot remember what else was in there.
Okay.
I just remember how thick it was, made out of foam, so they could fit this stuff. It was
Uh-huh.
all real nice laid out.
Okay.
Probably, I may have had a first aid kit in there too.
Now, what did the envelope say after you were 2 hours into the flight?
Proceed to a place called Jakarta, Jakarta, I believe. And everybody said, where's Jakarta? So, anyway, that was at Tunis. It's right outside of Tunis.
Mhm.
It's up in Tunis. And went overseas with the
How
group.
long did it take you to fly there? Did you fly direct there? Did you
No,
have to stop to refuel?
Oh, yeah, at least 4 or 5 days, I remember.
Okay.
We'd spend the night.
Mhm. So
So
where
the-
were your stops on the way? Would that have been Puerto Rico or?
Puerto Rico would be one, Trinidad was the next one, Belém, South America, Marrakech, Dakar, and you could spend an extra night in Dakar if you wanted, because the pilot wanted, it was a desolate place. So, I think it's about 5 days, really. The only way B-24, remember, was pretty slow.
And how many were there that flew together? How many in your unit?
The whole group.
The whole group?
The actual number in that went over, I cannot
Just
remember.
approximate. I
But
mean,
it
were
was 4 squadrons, just one right after another. The way the takeoff was, some would be strung out
Mhm.
in the whole route. While we were in North Africa, all we flew was local missions and lived in tents. Went into Tunisia to take a shower,
Oh.
or Tunis, take a shower. And then one day, orders came down for 5 crews to be replacement crews for another outfit up in Italy. And that's where we joined the 451st Bomb Group. We went up into, made a couple of stops up into Italy and ended up in a place called Castelluccia. Don't ask me to spell it.
Okay, I won't.
It was about 5 miles or so from Foggia, which a lot of people know where Foggia, if you're familiar with Italy, then you know Foggia. And that started the combat.
Now, was Italy still occupied?
The northern
Yeah,
part.
the northern
yeah,
part of it?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Can you describe a typical day of combat missions? Tell us what it was like.
Get up early in the morning, like 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. We lived in tents, 4 in tents.
Now, your unit, your group was stationed in North Africa, or at this time you'd moved into Italy, correct?
Yeah, from the
Okay.
44th
Now,
to the
where
4th.
was your group stationed in Italy? Where did you leave from to go on your combat missions?
Foggia, Castelluccia.
Castelluccia, okay.
If you can.
Okay.
It's about 5 or 10, I forget how far it was from Foggia, several miles. The typical day was you get up real early,
Mhm.
like 5 or I mean, 2, 3, 3:30 in the morning, because you have to eat breakfast, you have to go to briefing. The briefing was 2 or 3 miles from where we lived. You come back, eat some more breakfast, some of those famous pancakes they had that stayed with you for the whole day. And powdered eggs, everybody ate powdered eggs. And then, it'd still be dark. Just about daylight, you go down to your ships. They were already loaded, ready to go. You'd look it over. And wait for usually it was a green light tower, would either shoot a green flare. I don't know if you've ever seen it. It's called a Berry pistol. Shoots a.
Yes.
If you're going to go, they shoot a green flare. If you're not going to go, they shoot a red flare. And everybody says, oh, takes a big deep breath. But then you would take off. Take off could be anywhere, 6, 7 o'clock. Usually around 6 o'clock, if I remember right. And from there, it was just a flight. Your first one, you didn't know what to expect. It just seemed like a training mission. That's where those training missions paid off in operational training. That you said, well, this is not bad. So you start seeing those black specks in the sky.
Which is an anti-aircraft guns?
Black or anti-aircraft fire. First few missions, we didn't have any fighters. They were just like
So
a milk.
did you usually get fighter escort, or were the squadrons on their own?
Yeah, you were. We had those the black pilots from Tuskegee.
The Tuskegee Airmen?
Yeah, we had those as escorts,
Did you?
and they did a good job. If you've read about them,
A little bit.
they did a fabulous job. And some of the missions were rough, some were not so rough.
Describe one of the rougher ones to us. Just
Well, I think the first thing, to back up a little, it was summer in Italy, middle of summer. We got there in April, so like May and June, it got hot, just like here in the street. With no heaters that worked in the B-24, we had to dress with the 20 and 30 below temperatures up
and
there.
how high did the B-24 fly? How high would you fly?
Well, we averaged around 21,000.
Okay.
It just couldn't maintain altitude any higher than that. But anyway, we had like long john underwear that they used to have in the service, 2-piece wool. We had that on. We had wool coveralls on top of that, or your wool shirt and pants on top of that, coveralls, then sheep-lined pants and sheep-lined jacket on top of that in the summertime. Now, we were already wringing wet by the time you got off the ground. And it took about an hour to get everybody, all these airplanes formed up, they're ready to go. You're wringing wet with sweat. So that wasn't good. That's where I learned being cold and sweaty and getting cold doesn't cause you to catch a cold. Because we'd all die. There's nobody.
The mothers of America will be glad to hear that.
Oh, yeah. The roughest mission was really, well, I've been to Pulaski, went to Pulaski 3 times. Munich was a big one because that's one of their big cities. A place called Wiener Neustadt. Ball bearing factories up in there. There was other air bases. Munich, Wiener Neustadt, Pulaski. Even in France, southern France, some of our missions are over, most of them are over Yugoslavia, up in Europe, but some were in southern France. And you could watch airplanes, other guys in your squadron, pull out of formation. I've never seen anybody actually, like you see pictures of airplanes with wings blown off. I never saw anything like that, but it could happen. And
Now, did you ever get hit your craft by any anti-aircraft?
well, yeah, you got probably almost every mission, unless there was no flight, you would pick up some holes.
Did the plane protect you any, or was it too thin to be of much service that way?
25 thousandths thick aluminum. That's it. That's pretty thin.
That's pretty thin.
Later, they did build a seat. They called a coffin. It was made out of iron or steel, about 1/4 inch thick. across your bottom, up the side, and just slightly out, because you couldn't be out where it interfered with it. And that's the only protection. I think I only flew one of those twice.
Did you?
The rest of them are just sitting there and just hoping.
Now, how many, B-24, how many gunners did you have? I mean, did you have the nose turret? Was this the plane that came with several of those? Or
Yeah, well, that's called a GH or J model.
Okay.
That's a H, yeah, H. The one we have down here, the Strawberry Ridge, is a D model without the nose turret.
Okay.
These all had 250s out front, not modified, but built with the nose turret. So you had the nose turret with 2 guns, you had the upper turret with 2 guns, the tail with 2 guns, the ball turret with 2 guns, and 2 out the wings.
Okay. Now, the ball one was on the belly.
Yeah.
Okay.
It let up and did it.
Now, how many bombs could you drop? How much was your?
12 500 pounders was normal. That's the just the old iron bomb.
Mm-hmm.
We also carried what they call frags or fragmentation bombs
Mm-hmm.
and incendiary bombs.
Okay.
I
So
think
did you carry all of them at once, or
No.
different ones depending on the
you-
mission?
that was figured by headquarters
Okay.
what you're going to carry.
Mhm.
So the armament people loaded the night before whatever was called for. So you either had incendiaries, fragmentation, or iron bombs. Well, you could carry 2,002, but around 6,000 because of the length of the missions. All the missions ran 7 to 9 hours. So to get enough fuel on board, you had to cut back on bombing.
Mm-hmm. Wait.
So,
So how was the maneuverability of the plane? Was it
bad.
bad?
It was a mean airplane to fly. It was heavy under control.
Uh-huh.
They hadn't developed boost controls yet, hydraulic nor manual, so they were just tiring to fly.
Now, how long were you in Italy flying these missions?
It only took me 6 months.
6 months. And how did you have to have so many missions before you could?
They were called
come back home?
50 missions, or you got double credit for some of the long ones, like Munich and Boesti. You got credit for 2 missions. But the sorties were, I actually flew 37 trips, which ended up, a lot of them were double, so there were 50 missions, and you could go home.
Did you ever get shot down? Did you lose any of your squad there?
Nobody got hurt. They'd come close, had a nose gunner, a piece of flak went through the top of the turret. We all wore helmets when we got into actual combat, and it put a big dent on the top of his helmet. Had a navigator trying to close the bomb bay doors. You had to get down in the bomb bay and push a lever to close the door. Piece of flak went across his cheek. You could see the mark. And I always looked like they'd moved that over. It's like 2 inches. It probably tore his face off. As far as actually getting hurt, no. Oh, and one of the first missions we flew, the captain, this Captain Friedman, was in the left seat naturally. And a piece of flak went through the side of the airplane, through all of his clothes, into the cushion, which is filled with kapok. White kapok flew all over the cockpit. And I thought he was really hit, but it just
missed him.
man was lucky. It just went to the skin and then falling out into the cushion. That's again, I said, we'd have moved that over a couple of inches.
Now, the group that in the plane, the crew, did you guys stay together through the whole duration of your tour?
Yeah.
Did you? Okay.
Well, I'll take that back. Towards the end, when I got my own crew, I have to take that back. Now, another crew. What they would do would take co-pilots, when they got a little experience, and make them first pilots on a crew coming over, make that first officer or whatever he was, a co-pilot on another crew.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I had one tough mission, I'll put it there.
And what was that?
That got me which I'm proud of, the Distinguished Flying Cross.
Can you tell us about it?
Yeah, it was Forrest A again.
Mhm.
I made 3 trips to Forrest A. So just about on the bomb run, do you know what a runaway propeller is?
No.
Propellers have a maximum, like 2,700 RPM, and they're controlled on the inside, and you have a lever inside.
But you can control their
That
RPMs?
controls the RPM.
Okay.
You also have a button that if something happens, you can do what they call feather that prop. Instead of having the prop like this, it turns the blades, so it cuts down on the resistance.
Okay.
You can see going into the wind what this would do versus what this would do. So this, just a minutes from dropping the bomb, this propeller ran away, they call it. It exceeded limits.
Okay.
Well, to start, we think what happened. An oil line probably broke. It ran down, we had turbo superchargers underneath the engine to give air for altitude. Red hot. This oil ran onto the turbo, and they had a flame shooting back past the rear window. At the same time, all this pulled us out of formation, so the guys in the back got, one pilots were hit.
Yeah.
There's a camera hatch in the back that they open up when the cameraman goes, he takes pictures of the ground. They were lined up ready to bail out. And on top of all this, the intercom system went out. So it was a fun trip. And anyway, that prop, what they call ran away. He couldn't feather it. It exceeded from 27, it went up to 3,500 RPM. The danger, well then the prop froze, but it seized, the engine seized. Because by this time it had run out of oil due to that oil line breaking. So the prop just, two things can happen, or what can happen then, that prop can twist off of the shaft, take the other engine, it was on number 2 engine.
So it was an inside engine close
That's
to the
the
fuselage?
inside engine on the left side.
Okay.
It could take that outward prop, or it could go through the cabin and kill some people inside. So it did neither. It just stopped with the blades naturally.
Straight on.
So we had a rather long trip by ourselves back home,
So you had to fall out of formation and come back alone?
and no navigator.
No
No
navigator.
navigator. For some reason, I don't know why, they'd started either take the navigator or take the bombardier. 9 people instead of 10. So I was fortunate and I had the bombardier. I turned around and asked him, I said, "What's the heading home?" And his answer was, "I don't know." South of the bombardier. So anyway.
You haven't had navigation training, I think.
This was a fun trip. Anyway, since way back in primary training, flying, I had gotten lost in primary on a snowy day with white buildings. And
No
I said,
markers.
"Oh, you dumb cadet." Anyway, I finally figured out where I was at. From that time forward, whenever I flew, I kept in the reciprocal of the heading. If I was flying north, south is home. If I'm flying east, west is home. So that same thing happened there. I kept in mind what the heading, we made a couple of turns, but average,
Where were you flying over when all of this started to fall apart?
right over just that far from Ploesti, oil field in Romania.
Okay.
So,
So were you encountering much enemy aircraft fire at the time?
you know,
So it was,
we just hit the edge of it really, and that trip I got to go home. I got to turn away from it. But Ploesti was one of those places that had supposedly like 1,200 flak guns. The sky would get pretty dark. But,
now did you fly during the daylight or were you able to fly night missions?
we all daylight.
All daylight.
They tried night and it didn't work. They lost a few airplanes. some on takeoff people just for experience.
Yeah.
These pilots, some of them only had, I had 400 hours, which is not very much.
No.
So you didn't have the, you're taking a heavy airplane at night, and the runways are short. They're only like 5,000 feet, and that's, in a big airplane, that's not very much runway. So, several things. I think they stopped it right after that one mission. So I flew 50 days and came home.
Okay. And what was it like when you came home? Did you have any problems adjusting back, or what was the world like when you came back? Did you come back in through New York?
Yes, it did.
Okay. And what was it like when you came
By
home?
ship too. We didn't fly back.
Oh, you came by ship?
Ship.
Okay. Now, did you leave out of Italy, or did they send you over to London to return?
To Naples.
Naples.
Out of Naples.
Okay.
Oh, well, the other thing I knew, I was glad to see those 50 nations go by. And the number 13 has always been my lucky number. And I don't know, it just showed up on the 13th of August, I finished. At one time, we went to the Isle of Capri in Italy. Maybe you've heard of that.
Yes.
Nice place. That's called R&R. Spent a week over there. And when I got back, I had 13 missions to fly. So the 13 kept showing up. A lot of people.
My favorite.
So,
When you were over there, what did you get time off during these missions for R&R while you were serving in combat missions? Did you have some time off?
about halfway through, we went up to Isle of Capri.
Did you? And that was a little R&R. How long did you get off? How long was your furlough?
If I remember, just a week.
Just a week.
But it was an enjoyable week. Isle of Capri is a very nice place, very pretty.
Is it?
You've heard of the Blue Grotto, maybe?
Heard of all of them.
See the Blue Grotto.
So you said you weren't married at the time, but could you keep in contact with family
Well,
back here at home?
I forgot that, when I graduated.
Did you forget to mention that you got married here? Is that what you?
We have to get married. When I graduated from, when I went to B-24 training, my wife came down and told me all second lieutenants have to be married. I mean, my girlfriend.
Yeah.
I said, I didn't know that. So we got married.
Now, where was she from?
Lancaster, Ohio.
Okay, now how did you meet her? Was she working in a base, or how did that come about?
A friend of mine lived in Chillicothe. Worked at Wright Pat, over at Wright Pat. She and Ruth worked together.
Okay.
And I made a mistake and said, why don't you bring somebody down? So that started.
That mistake?
Yes, that started. So we got to be good friends. And then I went into the service. And then when I graduated from, we probably planned it then, but I went to B-24 in Nashville. We were living in Nashville, Tennessee. I said, well, come down.
And she did.
Big mistake.
Aww.
No.
Now, is this, are you still, did you guys stay married, the same lady you've been
Yeah.
married to? Okay.
53 years. She's gone.
Sorry. When you came back, did you stay in the service, or did you go into another profession, or
Yeah,
what was your
no.
life like when you came back?
We went to Nashville, to Miami, Florida, for reassignment, and I went to Liberal, Kansas, a B-24 base, as an instructor.
Okay.
Shortly after I got there, they said, would you like to go to the instrument school, instrument flying school? I said, yeah. It's in Bryan, Texas. So they sent me to Bryan, Texas as a student, and when I was through, they kept me as instructor. Now we went from 4 engines down to 1 engine in what's called an AT-6. So then I stayed there as an instructor, went to, they closed that base at Bryan, went to Barksdale Air Force Base, the whole school. Was there really just a few months, and orders came out to go to Greensboro, North Carolina. And I thought, what's in Greensboro, North Carolina? I first step to going back overseas.
Yeah.
Only in the Army of Occupation.
Mhm.
So I went back in the Army of Occupation.
So you got shipped back over?
Yeah, this is 46, early 46. So I went to a troop carrier outfit this time, C-47. And while we were there, I remember Secretary of the Air Force, a fellow named Johnson, decided the war is over, let's get rid of all these troops. And boy, they discharged everybody.
Mhm.
And I went back home, but I stayed in the reserve.
Mhm.
So I spent the next 2 or 3 job changes, ended up right here at Wright-Patterson, from whence I retired, but also retired out of the Air Force Reserve. I stayed flying in the 302nd Troop Carrier Group, which has been disbanded, C-46s, and then C-119s. Got recalled during the Cuban situation, remember that. And
Now, did you have to go to Cuba, or were you
no,
just on standby?
fortunately, you know how it ended up, but
Yes.
troop ships said,
Mhm. I know they did send some units down that way, but I didn't know.
yeah, we stayed in the States. We flew down to Florida. We took ammunition down, took troops down, things like that. But no mission over Cuba. And then I stayed in the reserve, retired out of the reserve, at the retired rank of lieutenant colonel. So from a draftee to lieutenant colonel, I figured pretty lucky life, like I was telling you. Somebody looked out for me.
Yeah. Okay. Did you, and kind of finishing up here, this is going to be seen by future generations. If you would like to add a final thought, a bit of wisdom, or something you'd like to share with future generations that would see this about your time in the service, about the military, what would you impart to them?
Nothing new, really. I did what any red-blooded American would do then. The country said, we need you. So I appreciate living in the United States, all the freedom we have. And I think it's worth fighting for. That's about all I have.
And